Well, good morning,
Good
Lauren,
morning. Hey,
Arif.
Justin.
Good to see you guys. It's funny, I woke up this morning and got ready for this service and just found myself really missing the building. I think being there last week to say goodbye to Ruth made that space and that ritual just alive again in me, and I'm missing it this morning.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, let's get started here with this Sunday morning worship. I want to say good morning and welcome to everyone that's joining us. My name is Justin Schroeder. I'm one of the ministers at First Universalist Church. I'm delighted you're here. I imagine you're coming in from across the city and the state and many other places. I'm delighted you're here with your children. Maybe you're here with your pets or your partner or your family, or maybe you're just watching alone. Maybe you're here for the first time. Welcome. Really delighted to be with you this morning. If you haven't already, I invite you to open up your chat box. It's a little icon at the bottom of your screen. And we've been doing this for the last few minutes, but welcome one another and say hello. Let us know where you're from, and we'll welcome one another into this space. So First Universalist Church has been a beacon of love and hope for generations. At the heart of this faith is the belief that each and every human being is whole and holy, beautiful and beloved. Our shared practices really as a faith community are to welcome and affirm and protect the light in each human heart, to listen deeply to where love is calling us next, and with humility, compassion, and courage to act for a more just world. We do all of these things as a faith community committed to racial justice. This is the life that we are inviting you into. These are the practices we are inviting you into as you journey with us and as we build our capacity for the long haul to be in solidarity with those working for a more just world. There are many ways you can connect with us. Let me share just a few of those. We are worshiping every week, virtual worship, 7 o'clock Wednesday evenings. Please join us for that. Of course, there's always Sunday morning worship at 10, and you can learn more about these services and ways to connect on our website after the service. I want to make sure you're receiving our weekly newsletter, The Liberal. This is our weekly kind of e-blast that just includes information about all kinds of ways to stay connected with our faith community and different opportunities to be involved. Today after the service, we'll be hosting 2 virtual coffee hours, one that is for Black, Indigenous, multiracial, and people of color, and one that is open for everyone. And finally, in these times of social distancing or physical distancing, of economic uncertainty, of illness, of living alone, of parenting, and of so many other things, we really want to be there for one another. We want to be there for you, and we want you to know you are held in this larger community. So if you would like to be included in our Cycle of Life prayer every Sunday, please reach out to Reverend Karen or reach out to anyone on staff, any of the ministers or anyone on staff. If you are in need of support, whether that's financial support or spiritual support or just a listening ear support, please do reach out to us. We want to be there. We need to be there. We need one another in these times that we are in. So as we continue to come in and gather into this place, I invite you, if you haven't already, just to take a moment. We are gathering as one virtual body from many, many places. And I invite you to take a moment just to center and still your own body, knowing we are doing this together around the city, around the state, around the country, to center our own bodies as we come into this time of renewal, this time of remembering, this time of worship together. And so I invite you to take 3 deep breaths with me as we come into this time and this hour of worship. And now I invite you, if you have a candle or your chalice with you or nearby, I invite you to get your chalice and to light your chalice. And we will say the words for the lighting of our chalice together.
Please join me for the words of the lighting of the chalice. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Thank you, Canute and Beatrice. Good morning. I'm Lauren Wyeth, your Director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministries. And today I have a story for you drawn from the Hindu tradition. As the story goes, a long, long time ago, when humans had just begun to thrive in the world, the gods became concerned that perhaps they had made these creatures too clever. The humans were creating language, building villages, they were hunting and gathering for their food. They were very busy and very pleased with themselves, and they were not seeking the counsel of the gods as often as they once had. So the deities gathered to contemplate this problem. Together, they agreed that they should hide the secret to life far away from the humans, though they debated where the best hiding place might be. One minor god argued for the deepest abyss in the ocean. She argued that humans would never reach the seafloor. Another argued for the highest peak on the very highest snow-covered mountain. Humans, he said, could never climb that high. But a more experienced god said, no, they'll find that. Humans are so curious and driven. I say, hide it on the far side of the moon. Well, the Supreme One considered all these ideas. They needed a solid plan to ensure that humans would remain humble and not use their considerable powers irresponsibly. Such an important secret must be hidden very well. None of the suggested hiding places seemed worthy to the great god, till all at once it came to them. I know. I'll hide the secret to life where these resourceful creatures will never find it. Where, clamored all the lesser gods, where? I'll hide the secret within the human heart, within the human heart. It's the last place they'll ever look. And all the gods nodded, and it was so. And so it is to this day. Would you like to unearth that secret, my friends? Many do want to find it. Some wise ones who have gone before us have left some clues on how it is done. It takes humility and discipline and great faith. They say this: be still, go inward, pay attention. The secret to life is there inside you, in the deepest corner of your heart. You must soften to get through the tight spaces. Breathe deeper to make a little more room. You'll need to bring your whole self on this journey, even the parts that are afraid, even the parts that scare you. Follow the call of love through the last door, behind the last door, to the very center of your being. Be brave. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And as you go this morning, let this song from Emma's Revolution, and sung now by our young children's coordinator, Seth Matz, help your heart open.
Take the seed that you have and plant it here. Give it water and time for a day or a year. Take the seed that you have and plant it here. Give it love, give it love, give it love, love, give it love, give it love. Take the song that you have and sing it here. Give it strength and time for a day or a year. Take the song that you have and sing it here. Give it love, give it love, give it love, love, give it love, give it love. Take the dream that you have and dream it here. Give it courage and time for a day or a year. Take the dream that you have and dream it here. Give it love, give it love, give it love, love, give it love, give it love. Take the seed that you have and plant it here. Give it water and time for a day or a year. Take the seed that you have and plant it here. Give it love, give it love, give it love, love, give it love, give it love, give it love, love, give it love, give it love.
Oh, goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much, Seth. You know, one of the things that I've noticed in this time since we've been in virtual worship is how much I miss you all and how much music just opens our hearts. So I was having a moment of church crying there. And now I invite you all to come into this time of prayer. And in particular, I want to invite the young and the young at heart to join me. If we were in our sanctuary right now, I would be inviting you to come up to the chancel, to join me at the front of the chancel. And so let's imagine that together. Let's imagine that you're walking up to the chancel. Maybe you're bringing your grown-up with you, maybe an older sibling. And we're coming together. We're coming together, being in each other's company for this time of prayer. Now, you may have noticed that the last couple of Sundays, I've been doing a fair bit of praying. And you maybe have heard me talk with your grown-ups about prayer. This morning, I want to talk with you in particular. The first thing that I want to say is that it is always a good idea to remember that prayer is not so much about talking with someone or something up there. These last couple of weeks, we've talked about prayer as connecting in to what we believe most deeply. We have talked about prayer as getting us lined up, mind, heart, and body. And one more way that we'll add today is that prayer is very much about that story that Lauren just told us. That prayer is how we move inside, moving deeper and deeper and deeper so that we get closer to that secret of life that is hidden inside each of us. And so I want to invite you to join me in this. So let's find a comfortable way to sit. And grown-ups, you can do this too if you want to. So I'm going to cross my legs. You can imagine me sitting cross-legged on the edge of the chancel. And let's find a way to sit that we can be pretty still. Sometimes we have a little bit of wiggles, but pretty still for a couple of minutes, all right? And once you find that place, breathe deep and imagine that breath going from your mouth or nose down into your chest. Just feel that. Nose and mouth down into chest. And let's take another breath and feel that breath going down into your belly. Just let it out gently. And one more breath that moves down from our mouth and nose into our legs. And one more breath where we breathe all the way down to our toes. And now that we're connected like this, mouth and nose breathing down to our toes, each breath that you take is going to go down to your toes. You don't have to do anything. It just will know to do that. And now we listen. We breathe in and listen. And the first thing that we might hear as we get still like this, as we come into this place of being present, the first thing we might hear are thoughts. My mind is busy a lot of the time. There are a lot of thoughts in here. Maybe yours is too. And so I invite you, if you would like, to chat or to type into the chat box some of the thoughts that are coming up, or you can ask your grown up to do this too. But if there are thoughts that are coming into your head, I invite you to share those. Just say them out loud. If we were in our sanctuary, some of you would give voice to the thoughts and I would repeat them. Instead, we're doing that with the chat box. So you can do that now if you want to. Or we can keep breathing and listening. Breathing. Now I invite grown-ups as well to share the things that have been making you feel sad, feel down. Kids and grown-ups, there are so many things that we carry. To the things that we've named together, I add Tamara Cairns and her family to those we surround in our care this morning. Tamara's mother, Nikki Lehman, entered hospice a few days ago, and we hold Nikki, Tamara, and their whole family in our hearts as they move through this time, made more difficult by the pandemic. what's also often true is that right next to the sadness are things that lift our spirits and make us smile. And so I invite you to share those things that are lifting you. Friends, there are two things that I want to add to those things that we are sharing this morning. One is that I want you to join me in surrounding in our love and our care Tamara Cairns and her family. Tamara's mother, Nikki Lehman, entered hospice a few days ago. And we hold Nikki, Tamara, and the whole family in our hearts as they go through this difficult time, made harder by this pandemic. And I also add to our prayers our neighbors at Lindale Farmstead and those staying in parks all around the cities. We are glad that you are here. We are glad that you are our neighbors. We are glad to help make your stay more comfortable. And we are committed to working together to bring homelessness to an end. Young ones, it has been so good to share this time with you. Grown-ups, you too. Now, friends, when we end our time of prayer at church, we say words that might be familiar to you, and we end them with amen. And so if you know these words, I invite you to share them with me. May the grip of addiction be loosened. May the weight of oppression be lightened. May grief be shared. May joy break through. And may love make every suffering bearable for us all. May it be so, and amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Arif. Thank you, Lauren, for inviting us to drop in, to settle down, to be with ourselves, with this moment in this time where physically we are not all in the same place, but emotionally and psychically we are gathered together, holding each other and holding this space. Thank you. So friends, it really was a lifetime ago. It really was a lifetime ago when I preached at the very end of December, back in the actual church building in the sanctuary with a pulpit on DuPont. That was a lifetime ago when I preached right before my family and I left on our sabbatical for New Zealand. And at that moment, none of us could hardly imagine that a global pandemic was lurking right around the corner, had already begun invisibly to spread and web across the world, across countries and borders and oceans. The full extent of that reach wouldn't be known until a little bit later in February and March, as the panic buying began, as the world watched with horror at what was happening in Seattle. We knew something of what had happened in China. We looked to Italy and Spain and then New York and the horror we saw there. And I remember, as this was unfolding, I remember talking with Reverend Jen right after the church had gone to virtual worship services. And Minnesota had just moved into this stay-at-home order, a kind of a soft lockdown. And borders around the world were closing, and the United States government had just issued this level 4 travel advisory, basically saying all US citizens come home immediately or be prepared to stay in place for an indefinite amount of time. It was a scary time for many of us, for all of us, I suspect. And I was worried about the church. I was worried about you. I was worried about the staff. I was worried about my family. I wondered what was next. I remember the waves of feelings sort of crashing over me, this anxiety, this uncertainty, this sense of being so far away from the people in place that was my home. I remember having so many COVID dreams and nightmares. Those have subsided a bit now, but they were there every night. So it was in that time when Reverend Jen and I spoke, when we connected on the phone and talked. And we talked this through. I talked with my wife, I talked with friends who were back in the United States. And it was clear as we began to hold all of these different pieces that the airports were a mess. They were jam-packed with panicked people who were trying to get home, and borders were closing and flights were canceling and being rebooked. It was a mess. And so together, Jen and I decided that we would stay put. We talked it through, and Jen, her refrain was, "We've got this. You've got that. You stay on sabbatical. You're better, safer there. We've got this." And I love that about Jen, and I love that about the conversation. I love that about this church, that sense of it's kind of unclear what's happening, but we think we got this. I also want to share with you that, just as a side note, just recently, Jen and I were talking about my sabbatical, and we both agreed how remarkably unimaginative we had been as we had thought through worst case scenarios for my sabbatical. We had a whole list of things, how to respond if this happens, what we'll do in this scenario. Like we thought we really had covered a lot of the bases. Nowhere on that list, of course, was global pandemic, economic collapse, racial justice uprising. So a few days after Jen and I spoke, New Zealand went into their own really strict 2-month lockdown. We were renting a home outside of Auckland, and we'd made some plans to travel around the North Island. And we quickly realized we just had to let go of any of those plans for travel, whatever it might be. We'd already seen a little bit of the South Island, and so we thought, well, that was great, but that might be all the traveling we're going to do. And so we settled into lockdown, and we settled into this posture of holding everything. What was next? When we'd get home, how we'd get home, what airline we'd get home on, all those things. We began to hold all of those things so lightly. And I want to stop here for just a minute, because this is where I need to back to December, back to several lifetimes ago, to share with you a practice that my family and I began to really engage in right as we left Minneapolis back at the end of December. You might call it a practice of surrender. You might call it a practice of letting go. We started calling it this practice of just holding things lightly. So what happened is that our flight from Minneapolis to San Francisco was delayed, which meant that we missed our connecting flight to Auckland. So you can imagine, we'd done all this preparation. We were all ready to go. We got to San Francisco. We were delayed. I was felt frustrated. I felt a little bit angry. I was like, oh, we need to call people and reschedule things. They're meeting us at the airport. Is that still going to work? Et cetera, et cetera. But then we took a collective breath, and it was really clear I wasn't going to pilot a plane by myself to Auckland. And there was really nothing we could do except let go and settle into what was. So we began right there, back at the end of December, to hold what we thought was happening lightly. We didn't plan on it. We didn't plan on a day in San Francisco, but we ended up going to Fisherman's Wharf with our boys. They loved it. We put our toes in the water. And then that night we flew to Auckland. Again and again on sabbatical, again and again in our lives, plans evaporate. The future we imagined dissolves. A new plan emerges, a new pathway emerges. And for us, our mantra became, hold it lightly. Whatever we think is going to happen, whatever we start to imagine and dream and plan, we told ourselves again and again, hold it lightly. So this was the practice that we'd already been building, that we already had some experience with as we moved into this very strict lockdown. And the lockdown was an invitation to hold everything even more lightly, recognizing how little we controlled. Now, I do want to be clear with you all this morning. This was not the sabbatical that we were anticipating, but it was a really good sabbatical. And I am incredibly grateful for the gift of that time that I had. This time to be with my family and to develop practices together. This time to fall in love again with my wife and our two boys. This time for my spiritual life and practices. This time to read, to really sink into books, to read Stamped from the Beginning and How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, two of the best books I've read recently. This time to meditate and journal. This time to draw wisdom from authors like Tara Brach and Thich Nhat Hanh, whose teachings really helped me deepen this practice of holding so much lightly. And I want to share with you this morning one of the stories that I read very early on in sabbatical and came back to again and again and still come back to. It's one that I have found particularly helpful from Tara Brach's book, Radical Acceptance, and one that I trust speaks to all of us on some level in this moment. I sure hope that it does. So Tara Brach shares a story about a man named Jacob, a man who was almost 70 years old and in the early stages of Alzheimer's. She writes, he was a clinical psychologist by profession, and he had been meditating for 20 years. He had a 20-year practice. And he was also aware that his faculties were deteriorating. Jacob had occasionally given talks about Buddhism to local groups, and he'd accepted an invitation to come speak to about 100 meditation students. He arrived at the event feeling alert and eager and really excited to share the teachings that he loved. So he took his seat at the front of the meditation hall, and he looked out at the sea of faces in front of him, and suddenly he didn't know what he was supposed to say or do. He didn't know where he was or why he was there. All he knew was that his heart was pounding furiously and his mind was spinning in confusion. He put his palms together at his heart, and Jacob started naming out loud what was happening. Afraid, confused, feeling like I'm failing, powerless, shaking, sense of dying, sinking, lost. For several more minutes, he sat, head slightly bowed, continuing to name his experience. As his body began to relax and his mind grew calmer, he also started to note that aloud. For several more minutes, he sat, naming what was happening as he calmed and came back to himself. And at last, Jacob lifted his head. He looked slowly around at those gathered, and he apologized. Many of the students were in tears. As one student put it, no one has ever offered us teachings like this. Your presence has been the deepest Dharma teaching. Tara Brach writes, rather than pushing away his experience and deepening his agitation, Jacob had the courage and training simply to name what he was aware of. And most significantly, he could bow to that experience. In some fundamental way, he didn't create an adversary out of feelings of fear and confusion. He didn't make anything wrong. Tara Brach concludes, we practice radical hospitality by pausing and then meeting whatever is happening inside us with this kind of unconditional friendliness. Instead of turning our jealous thoughts or angry feelings into the enemy, we pay attention in a way that enables us to recognize and touch any experience with care. So this story, when I first read it, and as I go back to it, it lands on me with a force and a truth that I have to hold, that I have to reckon with. It reminds me on some level that the secret of life is not complicated, but it requires attention. It requires bravery to really notice what's happening. It requires courage to come back to the present moment. It requires presence and attentiveness and mindfulness. So when I left back in December, I shared my hopes with the congregation that the sabbatical time might be a time to create a clearing in my life, and that in that clearing, I might see some new things emerge, other parts of my life that I had been ignoring. In that clearing, I might put aside some old habits and patterns. And sabbatical did create a clearing, a space to more honestly name what I was noticing, like Jacob did in that story I shared. Specifically, and perhaps most importantly, sabbatical gave me time to reconsider my parenting, to see where I was getting triggered in my parenting, and to name and to note those feelings that came up when I was triggered. Feelings like, I feel attacked. I feel really scared. I'm afraid I'm a terrible parent, hardly meeting this moment or the needs of my children. Or I feel really unappreciated in this moment. I feel confused in this moment. What do I do? And I began to hold those feelings more lightly, to let those feelings wash over me, to notice them, but not to have a concrete, immediate response to them, not to see them as some reality that was true that I had to respond to, but just to notice, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm experiencing. And then after the feelings settled and the heat of the moment lessened, I could ask myself, what is the next right step? What is the next elegant move, as Adrienne Marie Brown might say? What do I want to try now as a parent? How do I want to be present and show up to my children? In asking these questions, I tried to hold lightly to whatever had triggered me and to hold quite tightly to the idea of showing up in new ways as a parent. And this is the time I'm in, I think we're all in, holding so much lightly and holding so tightly to those deepest of commitments. And I think that practice, that essential practice, is applicable to every dimension of our lives. This practice, or something like it, is a beautiful seed that with water and care and love, that is attention and noticing, it can blossom into something beautiful. So I left New Zealand on June 9th, but I didn't leave these practices or these learnings. I left and I returned to a time of uprisings around the country as millions demand reimagining and defunding and even abolishing the police as we know them, so that those resources can support communities and housing and mental health and many other things that make for healthy communities. I returned to a time of the pandemic now spreading like wildfire across the United States, disproportionately impacting people of color. I've returned to a time of deep economic uncertainty. I've returned and my family is still in New Zealand. They are staying with dear friends we met, and their plan is to return in a month or two. It's not how we imagined it would be, but it's working, and we're holding things lightly. What all of this has made clear is that I could not meet this moment without this practice of holding lightly, of noting, of noticing, and then coming back to center, to the seed within, to the secret deep in my heart, to the breath that sustains me. Coming back to the present moment. And then from that place, discerning the next step, anchored in love. In other words, I am finding that the teachings and practices of Buddhism, to notice, to note, to name what is happening without getting too attached to the feelings or the story, just to notice it, that practice brings me back to the heart of universalism, to a love that holds us, to a love that helps steady us, to a love and a compassion that demands we let go of the hierarchies and stories that distort the reality of our deep interconnectedness and our common humanity. When I can observe what's happening and what I'm feeling without getting hooked on a story, I can more easily return to being present, to acting with compassion, and to doing the next right thing that love is calling me to do. So friends, may we all cultivate such practices. It might look different for you than it does for me, but may we all cultivate practices that help us notice and note what is happening and come back into the moment, trying to make the next right step. May we all come back to what is here, right now, and with curiosity and compassion and courage, figure out what the next right step is, holding lightly, grounded in love. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. This morning, our offering will be a 50-50 split between the Ministers' Emergency Fund and First Universalist Church. The Emergency Fund is a special fund designed to support members and friends of this faith community. So often lately, we have been helping with rent payments or mortgage payments, medical bills or medicine needs, even food. You just need to imagine the emergencies that so many are in and know that this fund is one small piece of how we can respond as a congregation. In countless ways, this fund has helped members and friends of this church, and your generosity makes a difference. You can give via the Square Cash app, you can text to give, you can give online, you can even send a check by mail to the church. And as we prepare to give and receive our offering, you will hear a piece by the Twin Cities vocal ensemble Cantus. It's a piece from a series of songs they recorded called the COVID-19 Sessions. They created this during the week of March 15th. They were designed as a gift to our community and all those who find themselves alone and searching for inspiration and comfort. Let us now listen to this beautiful music and give and receive our offering.
This is my song. This is my home.
friends. Please join us for virtual worship on Wednesday nights at 7. I'll be leading this week's service at 7 and Sundays at 10 o'clock in the morning. If you'd like to be included in the Cycle of Life prayer or are in need of support from the church in any way, please let Reverend Karen or any of us know, and we will be there for you. We want to be there for you and for one another. This is the work of our church. Do make sure you are receiving our weekly newsletter, The Liberal, so that you are in the know about things that are coming up and Zoom offerings and classes and other ways to get connected. And following this service, we'll be hosting 2 virtual coffee hours, one for Black, Indigenous, multiracial, and people of color, and one that is open to all. And as we move toward closing this time of worship, we'll bless each other with song. We will sing together, Go Now in Peace. In these times of uncertainty, may you discover and deepen the practices that anchor and hold you and call you back to love. May you know you are held by an expansive and generous and abundant love. May you be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.